This is Talking Law on Radio 97 with Despina Priala from Priala Legal. And right now, Despina and Brooke, we're going to look at some restrictions, what you can and can't do in Queensland from December 17.
Yeah, we've had the 13th, we've got that out of the way.
Yep.
17th is another time that new laws are going to come in. So what's the update, Des?
Okay, well, I have to say, I think it's going to be a bit of a nightmare for people trying to understand what is going to happen from the 17th. And we are starting these new laws from 5 a.m. on the 17th. So people understand that, because in the past, if you recall, we've had public health directions that have started on different times. We've had some start at 1 a.m, 5 a.m, 6 p.m, 12 p.m, midnight. So this is coming into effect 5 a.m. on that Friday, the 17th. And that is important for the hospitality industry to understand, because this is really targeted towards them in Queensland. And you've got, obviously, in hospitality, cafes, restaurants, pubs, taverns, nightclubs, etc. And a lot of those open for breakfast, lunch and dinner. Some of them only open for dinner or lunch. So it's important to understand it comes into play 5 a.m. So we'll say that first of all. And the other thing I want to say up front is there has been some conjecture recently that these new laws that they're talking about are not actually valid. But I can tell you that what I've read is these public health directions, they are coming into effect. They have been made law and they will commence at 5 a.m. on the 17th. Okay, so everyone needs to really understand that and listen this morning, and let's try and get through some of the things that they need to know. So the first thing is, similar to New South Wales and what happened in October, if you recall, we did a big segment on the changes in New South Wales. They're going to segregate again the rights for vaccinated people versus unvaccinated. And they've classified different areas or places as essential services versus non-essential services. And we'll go through that a little bit this morning, as much as we can in our short time. So what the government's saying too, when you read through these laws is, look, we've given you enough notice. You've had plenty of time to get vaccinated. This is not a punishment, and there is to be no leniency. So they're going to be quite strict, because their logic and their message is, this is not something we've brought on at short notice. You've all been told this year to get vaccinated. Right or wrong, whatever your beliefs are, you've had the notice. So if you choose not to get vaccinated, they're basically saying, well, you've been aware, these are the laws, it's your problem, and you're going to have to comply with what we're bringing into force on the 17th. So again, they're saying vaccination is the key to moving forward to hopefully get to an endemic type of state in this country. So when we talk about essential and non-essential services, the non-essential services are really targeting leisure activities, if you can put it simplistically. And they're really focusing on hospitality venues. So we're talking about nightclubs, we're talking about bars, we're talking about cafes, we're talking about restaurants. We're talking sometimes about indoor entertainment areas as well. Festivals and Queensland government owned galleries, museums, libraries. So those sorts of venues that we're talking about that are considered non-essential services. Okay, so essential services, so be clear about this, that these can be accessed by everybody. So vaccinated, unvaccinated, okay? And those essential services are things like grocery stores, pharmacies, bottle shops.
That's important. That's very important during these last 2 years. Yeah,
Of course.
Exactly. So though there are no restrictions for the unvaccinated for essential services, but there are restrictions for non-essential. So maybe if we go through some of the frequently asked questions that are on the government website, that may help create a bit of clarity about the difference between what you can and cannot do. Because one of the things that came to me immediately is, if you're going into a big shopping centre, right, you're going to have a mixture of essential and non-essential places. If you're going into a sporting venue or sporting club, you will have a pub perhaps attached or a restaurant attached to a sporting club. So what do you do there? So let's go through some of these frequently asked questions.
All right, and there are 13 pages here. You've printed them out from the Queensland Government
Don't say
Health
that way, and
website.
everyone's going to turn off going, I'm not going to sit
We won't go through all 13 pages.
We're going to go through the top
The
frequently
best of,
asked.
yes.
The best of, yeah.
Yes, that's right. So hopefully I've picked those for everybody. And we've only got, I think, 8 minutes. Anyway, if I'm right, looking at the clock. So let's go through some of the questions. So For example, residential aged care facilities. So that's one of the items that have come up, and you do have to be vaccinated. But there is an exception if you're going to visit someone at the end of their life, obviously. So that's one of the things. Can I visit someone at the end of their life in a residential aged care facility and I'm unvaccinated? The answer is yes. Can I take my unvaccinated child to a restaurant or stadium? So we're talking about children under 16. Remember, vaccination rules apply to people over 16 years of age, or 16 and over. So yes, you can, but the restrictions apply to people who are adults, 16 and over. So other questions. So let's have a look here. Can I still get groceries if I'm unvaccinated? Yes, you can still get groceries from the grocery store. It's an essential service. Can I go to a food court? So the answer is yes, unvaccinated people can go to a food court. So you can maybe think about the logic there or no logic. I don't want to comment on that.
Yeah,
but me and Wayne can say it's crazy.
Because the logic behind is if these places that you can go into are not places you can stay. Like, for example, a cafe, restaurant, you would sit, you would eat, you would drink. Yeah. And if you're unvaccinated, you can't do that.
Yeah, but you could still...
But you can go to a food court.
You could still be in a food court with several hundred other people at busy lunchtime.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Inside.
Exactly. So I don't know the stats on how many people go to a food court at takeaway and how many people go to a food court that sit down. So it's a bit strange. Can I go to a shopping centre? The answer is yes, but remember there may be restricted venues inside. So cafes and cinema, for example, you can't go into those inside a big shopping centre unless you're vaccinated. Okay. Can I go into a bottle shop? Yes, because a bottle shop's considered retail. So you're not sitting down drinking, you're actually going and taking away. You're buying alcohol and you're leaving. So unvaccinated people can go into a bottle shop. Can I go and attend a Christmas carols or New Year's fireworks events? The answer is yes. Apparently you can, because it's an outdoor community event and there are no rules for that, or no restrictions. Can I go to a farmer's market? So there are quite a few of those on the Gold Coast. So the answer is yes, you can go to community-based markets. Can I go to a fast food quick service restaurant? Yes, the answer is you can, because most of those are considered drive-through.
But you can still walk in and sit down. Can't
Well, only vaccinated people can dine in. They've made that clear.
Okay.
So we're talking drive-through only.
Drive-through.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I stay at a hotel for accommodation purposes? Yes, unvaccinated people can stay for work or leisure. However, often is the case that you might have a pub or restaurant associated with that accommodation you are not allowed to access unless you're vaccinated. Yes, you can see the pattern here that's emerging, can't you? So can I go into a restaurant attached to a sporting club? Which is a really good question because there's quite a few of those on the coast. The answer is no. If a club has both sporting facilities and restaurant bar facilities, unvaccinated people can only access the sporting or exercise facilities.
So the sporting part, yes. The restaurant, no.
Exactly, right? So next one, do I have to wear a mask if I'm vaccinated? Good question. I suppose people are wondering.
Yeah.
So the answer is they're not tied to vaccination status. So they're saying that currently the mask wearing is not tied. In other words, if you are fully vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. But they've said here, of course, we still think it's a good idea to wear a mask.
And until, I guess, the Premier says we want you to wear masks, then it would come into effect. Yeah.
Exactly right. So let's have a look at some other things. Interesting scenarios that will play out if you've got children and one parent's vaccinated, one parent isn't. Yeah. And if that child ends up in hospital. So there's quite a few questions that they've posed there about what happens and what if the parents are taking turns. Will the hospital let you? So yes, they will, but there'll be restrictions in place for the unvaccinated parent, okay, as opposed to the vaccinated parent. And the hospitals, I dare say, will dictate those, and no doubt it will include face masks, yes, that you'll have to wear. So let's have a look at some others. Now, who is going to have to enforce these, which is a really good
Big question.
Yeah, it is.
So unfortunately, the business owners of these venues are going to have the liability. Okay, so and we've seen that before. So I suppose nothing new there, but some tricky situations. And I think you mentioned this to me off air, Brooke. What happens if you have a wedding? So who's responsible to have to enforce? Exactly. Is it the bridal party? Is it the person paying for the wedding? Is it the organisers? Or is it the actual owner of the venue that's holding the wedding? And according to this website, it's the owner of the venue, whoever that may be, that it's going to be liable.
So
if they don't enforce it, there'll be fines.
So I guess if you book in a wedding, then the owner, a part of that process would be who is coming, are they all vaccinated? If not, then these are your capacity limits, because then if you do have a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated at a wedding, it's going to affect how many people you can invite.
Exactly right. And funerals is another thing. So funerals have some restrictions, but not the same, because they consider funerals are come about at short notice, whereas weddings are a planned event.
Yeah.
So it's going to be seen differently. And can the owner of an essential business, which we've just talked about, decide not to permit entry to unvaccinated patients or staff? So we've just read the rules about, well, no, if you're unvaccinated, you can access essential services. And it says here, well, the essential businesses can self-impose rules for patrons and decide to refuse entry for unvaccinated. So I think that's going to cause, again, confusion, because it's quite clear that they've said essential services you can access unvaccinated, non-essential you cannot if you're unvaccinated. You're restricted. But then it says, but if the owner wants to self-impose some rules that might differ, they can. That's going to cause problems. I think it's going to be safer if business owners just stick to what they've actually regulated and what they've said, rather than some arbitrary, well, I'm going to do whatever I like.
It surely would cause some fights. Possibly at the
Exactly.
door, because that's so confusing.
Exactly.
Going to maybe a privately owned grocery store and they say no, you can't come in. Imagine going, well, I need to get my groceries. And
Exactly.
then they have to enforce that.
Exactly. So the other thing I just want to say very quickly is that try, as a person in Queensland, when you're wanting to access these places and knowing the rules that are coming out, if you are refused entry, rightly so, because you're unvaccinated, by the person at the front door, whoever they may be, try not to create, chaos
Be respectful.
yes, because they're only trying to enforce the rules that the government is imposing, not them personally. So try and remember that. But hopefully that's shed some light on what's coming up on the 17th of December in Queensland.
Well, thank you for your hard work, Despina.
Always a pleasure.
You're the best. We will meet with you next week again for our very last segment of Talking Law, and we're going to recap all the great segments and the law changes and everything that's happened in 2021, which will be huge, to say the least.
And it's been a very interesting year indeed.
Thank you so much, Despina. Talk to you next week.
See you then.
See you then.